Have you ever seen justice handcuffed by its own defenders? It was a quiet afternoon in downtown London. Judge Amara Lewis had just left the courthouse after finishing a long hearing. She wore a simple black coat and carried a small briefcase. No one could tell from her calm appearance that she was one of the city's most respected judges. As she walked toward her car, two police officers approached, their eyes narrowing the moment they saw her. Officer Clark muttered something under his breath about suspicious behavior, while Officer Davis followed without question. Amara smiled politely when they stopped her, thinking they needed help. But instead, Clark demanded to see her ID, accusing her of stealing the very car she owned. Shocked but composed, she tried to explain, showing her keys and registration. Clark ignored her words, his tone sharp, his prejudice louder than reason. People began to watch. Emma Turner, a passerby, quietly pulled out her phone to record. Amara's heart pounded, not from fear but disbelief. After years of defending truth and justice, she was now facing its failure firsthand. When she reached for her phone to call her assistant, Clark grabbed her wrist and twisted it behind her back. The crowd gasped. Davis looked uneasy but said nothing. Amara didn't shout. She simply said, with quiet authority, "You're making a terrible mistake." Clark smirked and replied, "We'll see about that." As they pushed her into the police car, Emma whispered, "I know who you are. Don't worry. I'll make sure the world knows what they've done." The siren wailed through the city streets as Amara sat in silence, her mind not on fear, but on the question that echoed through her soul: if this could happen to her, a judge, what hope did others have? The cold metal door of the police station slammed behind Amara Lewis as Officer Clark marched her through the narrow hallway. The smell of stale coffee and dust filled the air, the fluorescent lights flickering like they too hesitated to stay on. Amara's hands were still cuffed, her wrists red from the tight grip of Clark. Officer Davis followed behind, avoiding her eyes, his face pale with uncertainty. Amara remained silent, her head high, her calm presence almost unsettling in the chaos around her. Clark barked orders at the desk sergeant, telling him they had caught a woman trying to steal a car near the courthouse. The sergeant, tired and uninterested, simply nodded and began filling out paperwork. Amara spoke softly but firmly, saying she was Judge Amara Lewis and that this was all a mistake. Clark laughed in disbelief, his arrogance echoing through the room. "You, a judge?" he mocked, shaking his head. "Maybe in your imagination." Davis shifted uncomfortably, but still didn't speak. Amara tried to keep her composure, but inside she felt a deep sting, not from the cuffs, but from the insult. She knew her words meant nothing to men who had already decided who she was based on her skin. In the waiting area, Emma Turner entered quietly, holding her phone close. She had followed them to the station, determined to make sure Amara's story wasn't buried. From her seat, she began sending the video to a local journalist she knew. She watched as Amara was pushed into a small interrogation room, Clark standing tall with his chest puffed out like he had caught a criminal. He demanded that she confess to trying to break into the car, ignoring every piece of evidence she offered. Amara calmly explained that the car was registered in her name, even giving them her government ID number. But Clark laughed again, telling Davis to check for fake IDs. The humiliation was deep, but Amara refused to lose her dignity. She spoke clearly, her voice steady, telling them that every injustice begins when those in power stop listening. Clark snapped at her to shut up. Davis looked torn, his eyes softened for a second, but he quickly turned away. Hours passed. The clock ticked louder with every second, the air thick with tension. Outside the station, a small crowd began to gather. Emma's video was spreading quickly online, hashtags forming across social media. Judge Amara Lewis was trending. People were outraged. Inside, the phone at the front desk rang. The sergeant answered, his eyes widening as the voice on the other end introduced himself, Mayor Thomas Green, demanding to know why one of the city's judges was in custody. Panic flickered in Clark's eyes for the first time. He walked toward the door but hesitated, still refusing to believe it. In the interrogation room, Amara sat quietly, her calm expression more powerful than any outburst. When the sergeant entered and whispered something to Clark, his face went pale. He looked at her, suddenly realizing the magnitude of what he'd done. The arrogance drained from his posture, replaced by fear. Amara slowly stood up, her handcuffs clinking softly. She looked directly into Clark's eyes and said, "I told you this was a mistake." Davis looked down, ashamed. Outside, the noise of reporters and flashing cameras filled the air. The truth was out. The woman they had humiliated was one of the most respected judges in the city, and now the whole world was watching. The heavy station doors burst open as flashes of cameras exploded across the room. Reporters shouted questions, microphones waved in the air, and confusion spread like wildfire. Officer Clark froze, his confidence crumbling as the realization struck. This wasn't just another routine arrest. This was a career-ending disaster waiting to unfold. Amara Lewis stood in the middle of it all, calm, composed, her wrists still red from the cuffs. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't demand vengeance. She simply looked at Clark, and that silence spoke louder than any scream could. Officer Davis stood behind him, his eyes full of regret, the weight of guilt pressing harder with every headline flashing across the reporters' phones. Judge Amara Lewis wrongfully arrested. Police detain black woman without proof. The world was watching, and this time there would be no quiet cover-up. The mayor's car screeched to a stop outside the station. Within moments, Mayor Thomas Green stormed in, his voice thunderous as he demanded answers. "Do you have any idea who you just put in handcuffs?" he shouted at Clark, his tone full of disbelief and anger. The sergeant tried to calm the situation, but the damage was irreversible. Amara, still standing with dignity, took a slow breath. "It's all right, Mayor Green," she said softly. "Let them finish what they started. I want to hear how they justify this." Her calmness disarmed the entire room. Clark's arrogance evaporated, replaced by trembling defensiveness. "She matched the description," he muttered weakly. "We were just following protocol." The mayor's eyes burned with fury. "Protocol?" he snapped. "You arrested a sitting judge without asking for identification, while she was standing beside her own car, and you call that protocol?" Emma Turner stepped forward from the crowd, her phone still recording. "I have the whole thing on video," she said firmly. "Every word, every insult, every minute she was treated like a criminal." The room went silent. Amara turned her head slightly toward Emma and gave her a small, grateful smile. "Thank you," she whispered. Clark's face turned red, panic rising in his chest. He glanced at Davis, hoping for support, but Davis couldn't meet his eyes. The truth was undeniable now. He had seen the injustice unfold. He had heard every word Clark said, and he had done nothing. The guilt hit him like a tidal wave. The police chief arrived moments later, pushing through the crowd, his expression grave. He walked straight to Amara and bowed his head respectfully. "Judge Lewis, I am deeply sorry for what happened," he said quietly. "You will be released immediately, and an internal investigation will begin at once." Clark tried to interrupt, but the chief raised his hand. "Not another word," he ordered. "You've embarrassed this department and this city." Amara looked at Clark, her voice soft but powerful. "Do you know what makes this so painful, Officer Clark? It's not the arrest. It's the fact that you never stopped to see me as a person. You saw a color, not a human being. You saw a stereotype, not a story." Her words cut through the room like glass. Davis lowered his head, tears forming in his eyes. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I should have stopped it." Amara looked at him, her expression full of quiet strength. "Then stop it next time," she replied. The crowd outside erupted as Amara walked out of the station, the sun shining brightly against the flashing cameras. Reporters rushed forward, asking if she planned to sue, to press charges, to fight back. But Amara paused, looked straight into one of the cameras, and said calmly, "I don't want revenge. I want reform. I want every officer to look beyond what they see and listen to who we are. This wasn't just about me, it's about every person who's been treated like they don't belong." The world fell silent for a moment as her words spread across every news channel, every phone screen, every heart that had ever felt injustice. That night, Emma uploaded the full video online. Within hours, it reached millions. Messages poured in from people who had faced similar experiences, their voices echoing with hers. Officer Clark was suspended pending investigation. Davis requested reassignment and began speaking out in anti-bias training programs. And Amara, she returned to her courtroom the very next morning, standing taller than ever before. The same police department that had humiliated her now stood at attention, silent with respect as she passed through. As she sat behind her bench and looked at the defendant before her, a young black man accused without solid proof, she took a deep breath. "Everyone deserves to be seen," she said firmly, her gavel striking once. Outside the courthouse, Emma stood smiling, proud of the courage that had changed everything. And to everyone watching this story now, remember, silence supports injustice, but speaking up changes the world. Comment below what lesson you learned from Amara's strength, and don't forget to subscribe for more true stories that remind us respect should never depend on color. The morning after the arrest, the entire city buzzed with one name, Judge Amara Lewis. News channels replayed the footage on loop. Headlines screamed of injustice and power abuse. Comment sections overflowed with anger, disbelief, and admiration. But while the world debated, Amara prepared silently for what she knew must come next. Not revenge, not anger, but justice through truth. She sat in her office, sunlight cutting across her desk, papers neatly stacked, and her reflection calm in the glass window. A knock came at the door. It was Emma Turner. She looked nervous but hopeful. "Judge Lewis," she began softly, "I wanted to say, you changed something in me yesterday. I used to walk past things like that. I won't anymore." Amara smiled warmly, standing to shake her hand. "That's how change begins, Emma," she said gently. "One person refusing to stay silent." Meanwhile, Officer Clark sat alone in the police station's interrogation room, the same place he had humiliated countless others. His uniform felt heavier than ever. Reporters were camped outside, demanding answers. Officer Davis waited outside, guilt eating at him. The chief entered, files in hand, his tone cold and final. "You don't understand what you've done, Clark. You didn't just arrest a judge. You exposed everything wrong with how you see people." Clark tried to defend himself, his voice trembling. "She looked suspicious. I didn't know who she was." The chief slammed the folder on the table. "That's exactly the problem. You didn't see a woman, you saw a stereotype." Clark's shoulders slumped. For the first time, arrogance gave way to fear. The chief turned to Davis. "You had a chance to stop this," he said sternly. "You didn't." Davis nodded slowly. "I know, sir, I froze, I let fear win." The chief sighed, rubbing his forehead. "Then don't freeze again. Because next time, silence won't just cost you your badge. It'll cost someone their dignity." Later that afternoon, Amara was invited to speak at a public forum on justice reform. Cameras flashed as she took the stage, her presence commanding silence. She looked out at the crowd, faces of every color, every background, watching her with awe. "Yesterday," she began, her voice steady and powerful, "I was not a judge. I was not a woman in power. I was simply a person who looked different, and that was enough for someone to decide I was guilty." The audience listened in complete silence. What happened to me happens to thousands who don't wear a title, who don't have cameras watching. But they matter, their pain matters. She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. "Justice," she said softly, "isn't about power, it's about empathy, it's about seeing people as people." She finished, applause erupted, not just polite, but thunderous. People stood up, some with tears in their eyes. Even Officer Davis, standing in the back of the room, clapped quietly, his head bowed. After the speech, he approached Amara cautiously. "Judge Lewis," he said, voice trembling, "I wanted to apologize. I froze when I should have spoken. I didn't act, and I'll regret it forever." Amara looked at him with calm eyes. "Acknowledging your silence is the first step toward change," she replied. "Now use that guilt to make sure no one else experiences what I did." Davis nodded, tears slipping down his cheeks. "I will, ma'am," he whispered. Weeks passed. Officer Clark was officially suspended, his name removed from the force. He avoided public places, haunted by the viral video that had become a symbol of racial injustice. Davis transferred to the department's community division, helping train new recruits in anti-bias education. Emma Turner became an advocate, sharing her video in schools and public events, teaching the importance of courage. And Amara continued her work, presiding over cases, shaping laws, and inspiring others through her quiet grace. One day, as Amara walked into her courtroom, she noticed something unusual. Every officer standing there saluted her, including the new recruits. Respect filled their eyes, not out of fear, but understanding. She nodded back, proud yet humble. The courtroom filled, and she began a new hearing, a case about wrongful detention. As she listened to the testimony, her mind flashed back to that night, the cold handcuffs, the flashing lights, the humiliation, and she silently promised herself it would never happen to anyone else again if she could help it. After court, as she stepped outside, reporters gathered once more. One of them shouted, "Judge Lewis, after everything you went through, do you forgive the officers who wronged you?" She paused for a long moment, then smiled faintly. "Forgiveness," she said, "doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing peace over pain, but never allowing silence to replace truth." Her words spread across the nation, echoing through social media and news broadcasts. People called her the judge who changed the system. That evening, Amara sat at home with a cup of tea, the city lights glowing beyond her window. Her daughter walked in, holding a school essay that said, "My mom is a hero because she teaches people to see hearts, not colors." Tears filled Amara's eyes as she hugged her tightly. And now, to everyone watching this story, remember, injustice hides in silence, but change begins with courage. Never be afraid to speak up, no matter who stands against you. Comment below what lesson you learned from Judge Amara's story, and don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories that remind us real justice starts with respect.